A BBC investigation has revealed what could be the real reason Rupert Lowe was ousted from Reform, and with an explosive statement from Rupert Lowe himself suggests this issue is not going to go away quietly, and there could be legal battles to follow. You'll recall that Rupert Lowe criticised Nigel Farage in a Daily Mail interview. Reform has always denied that there was any connection between his suspension and the criticism of the party, but I was always a little bit sceptical about that connection, and as were lots of other people. Obviously, it's up to you to decide what you think from reading the article, but I'll give you some views and we'll go through it together on this video. But first of all, if you are new to me, I am Daniel Shansmith, a barrister of England and Wales. Please do subscribe to the channel. I'm independent, and even if you're not new to me and you've been watching for a while, what are you doing? Please do subscribe. About half of you don't do that. I'd really appreciate it if you did. So let's get into this. So I've always been sceptical about the statement from Reform that there's no connection between the two, because the dates are so aligned that I think it certainly sounds likely that there was a connection between them. Now, Rupert Lowe's Daily Mail interview was on the 5th of March, where he called Reform a protest party led by the Messiah. He was then suspended on the 7th of March, a couple of days later, and even reported to the police over claims and allegations that went back quite some time. Now, I'm always a little bit dubious, a little bit skeptical, a little bit cynical. Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's that I'm a lawyer as well, but I always seem to think that these things are very often connected. Rupert Lowe has since said that this is a malicious witch hunt and it's motivated to remove him because he dared to ask questions, etc. Just to be clear with what Nigel Farage and Reform have said so far, the bits that are highlighted here, Nigel Farage told the BBC that the suspension was to protect the party. Simple. The newspaper attack on Reform UK is a separate but dreadful. He's previously insisted the party was duty-bound to look into any allegations of wrongdoing, and Richard Tice previously told the BBC that there was absolutely no truth in the claims between a link between the decision to suspend Rupert Lowe and the allegations being made public. But as I say, that doesn't stop one from being a little bit dubious and a little bit cynical. Not to say that those cynicisms are true, but you can have the thoughts nonetheless, and it's up to you what you think. And do your own research as well. But this investigation by the BBC looked into messages that seemed to show a different side of this story. The BBC reported that in one message, Nigel Farage said Rupert Lowe is contemptible when he was asked by an activist who's not currently a member why Reform had not allowed a lawyer to complete the investigation before suspending Rupert Lowe. To which Nigel Farage apparently said, because he's damaging the party just before elections. Disgusting. Now, that might be what Nigel Farage said, it might be what he thought, but this does then tend to draw a link between the events. The BBC goes on, when it was suggested that the investigation into Rupert Lowe was a response to the criticism of his leadership, Nigel Farage apparently replied on WhatsApp, "We are definitely damaged and within 2 weeks of nominations." Awful, he apparently said. He then apparently went on to say that the Mail interview was a side issue and that the party had to investigate the claims against Rupert Lowe. But, the BBC says, the messages reveal a level of animosity between Rupert Lowe and his team and the Reform UK leadership, alongside the claims about his behaviour, which Rupert Lowe vehemently denies. The BBC's source themselves is also the subject of an allegation of bullying, which they also strenuously deny. The BBC also spoke to many members of Rupert Lowe's team, among them people that have worked alongside Nigel Farage for years and even admired him. Many, they say, are now deeply critical. One's apparently said, Nigel is thin-skinned and egotistical. I've spent years defending him, but the aura has gone from me now. Reporting Rupert to the police? Come on, they're trying to put him in prison. The staff member then went on to claim that the root of this whole row was Elon Musk's praise for Rupert Lowe on X, saying Nigel's very sensitive about his American contacts. Another said it's absolutely terrible that the party is going to the police. You'd never find someone more kind and considerate than Rupert. And so all seems a little bit odd here, particularly with the timing. So I thought I'd have a look at and will read out to you some or all of Rupert Lowe's statement on this reporting. So I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. I will link this below so you can go and read it for yourself as well. Rupert Lowe says, in messages uncovered through a BBC investigation, Nigel Farage personally admits that the real reason why he removed me from Reform. It was because I raised reasonable and constructive criticisms about Reform structure, policy and communication in the Daily Mail interview. That is why they've tried to disgracefully ruin my reputation. Read it for yourself, and that's the link to the BBC article, both of which I will link in the description below. Rupert Lowe's statement here as follows. He says, these messages from Farage himself, uncovered through BBC investigation, prove that he kicked me out of the party and launched this malicious witch hunt because I dared to ask responsible questions of reform and its leadership. His visceral hatred of me is evident, particularly following the Daily Mail interview. He was directly asked why I was removed before any investigation and therefore about the reason behind my expulsion and the following smear campaign. His response, in writing, because he's damaging the party just before elections, disgusting. That's the message I've just read out. He's referring to the Daily Mail interview I gave. He says, which was published the day before Reform began their public assault on my reputation. They attempted to brutalise my character, all because I raised legitimate and constructive concerns in that article. Read the BBC investigation and Farage's words and make up your own mind. And I urge you to do the same. I am horrified that this has been allowed to happen. These messages unquestionably prove that the Reform leadership has zero integrity. I have no faith that their investigation is being conducted in a fair manner. Just read the timeline. And so this is where you might be cynical. And you know, this is not to say you don't still support Reform. And all of this is a bit disappointing because I had high hopes for Reform, and Reform will probably still go on to do very well. So all of that and this is a little bit disappointing. But if we look at this timeline, again, it may make you feel a little bit cynical. Reading on. The interview took place on the 25th of February. On the 26th of February, Farage's team were made aware of the interview. On the 27th of February, the vexatious complaints were raised or escalated within Reform roughly a month after complainants claimed they informed Parliament. On the 28th of February, I received the first letter about the allegations from Anderson, with no warning. All another strange coincidence, it seems. Now, I'm always sceptical about dates that just seem to collide and coincide. He goes on, I am not a Reform MP. My staff are not Reform staff. I will not be engaging with the Reform investigation into blatantly vexatious complaints made by former employees who both admitted serious offences and were going through the disciplinary process regarding this misconduct before any of their issues were raised. There is no credible evidence of any bullying by anybody because there was none. This has been weaponised in a desperate attempt to smear my name. If I'm contacted by the independent parliamentary authorities, I will fully cooperate with them. I've heard nothing from any relevant parliamentary body, nor have my team. I will not work with the rotten and deceitful Reform leadership, he says. Their disgraceful actions have put my honest and decent team through hell. They've hounded my employees to damage me. If Reform continues to harass my staff, trust me, there'll be legal consequences. I'll personally see to that. He says, Farage has admitted himself in writing that the motivation behind my removal was the Daily Mail interview, in which I raised reasonable and constructive questions of Reform structure, policy and communication, following months of pushing for change behind the scenes. Now, just to be clear, as quoted by the BBC, that's all been denied. That's what they say. Rupert goes on, Nigel Farage must never be Prime Minister. All I've done is tell the truth, and I'll continue to do so. In further messages reported by the BBC, Nigel Farage was apparently asked whether this row could have been handled better. And apparently he replied in relation to the allegations of bullying. In the current world, we have to take this seriously and to be seen to take this seriously, which I suppose is perfectly fair enough. And so I, for one, think that this is a real shame because I think Reform does offer up a genuine, real alternative to both Labour and Conservative. It appears to be still growing. Nigel Farage claims that polls put them at 27%, ahead of both Labour and Conservative, but you can see from some of the responses here that people are still very sour and sore about what's happened to Rupert Lowe. And I get the impression that people just don't buy that this was one big coincidence and actually it was a direct response to those comments made by Rupert Lowe, which on the face of it was just Rupert Lowe saying what he thought. And I personally don't think he should be criticised for that, and certainly not ousted from the party if there was a connection between the two. But just looking at a recent post from Rupert Lowe here, he says, silencing critics doesn't stop failure, it just guarantees nobody warns you about it. He says, I've run big businesses, I hire people who are smarter than me, more capable than me, and know more than me. I trust them, I welcome criticism and robust debate, that's why I pay them. He says, I know what I don't know. In fact, I know that I don't know an awful lot. But I find people who do know and trust them to deliver. That's how organisations succeed. It's the only way organisations succeed. A good leader doesn't create followers, they create more leaders. And now I read from The Telegraph that there is a claim that Reform UK candidates are being required to sign a gagging order, as in a non-disclosure agreement. Reform denies this, of course. A spokesperson said that they categorically deny that council candidates are required to sign NDAs to stand for Reform. So all of this a little bit messy and a little bit disappointing. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I mean, I know a lot of you on this channel watching my videos have shown great support for Rupert Lowe, particularly from the interview that we did some time ago, about 45 minutes long interview. If I'll remember to link it, I'll put that below. Let me know what you think of him. Let me know what you think of Reform. Let me know what you think is going to happen. Would you still support Reform without Rupert Lowe, or has that sort of soured it for you a little bit? Because I did a couple of polls as well. One, I said, will removing the whip from Rupert Lowe harm Reform UK's chance of success? 50,000 people, 50,000 people voted on that poll, and 78% said yes, it will harm their chance of success. In another poll, I asked, do you still support Reform, or have the recent events with Rupert Lowe caused concerns? 55,000 people voted on that one. 35% of you said you still support Reform. Some concern shown by 48% of you, so roughly half of you have some concern. And 17%, that was 18% for a good while, 17% now said that you are disappointed and cancelling membership or considering cancelling membership. So a lot of turmoil here with this party, but I suppose that's to be expected with a relatively new party. But as I said, let me know your thoughts and comments below. From what I can see, they are still growing. It appears to be still growing. It appears to be a strong opposition to Labour and Conservative. I just think it's disappointing with what's happened with Rupert Lowe. That's my personal view. Let me know yours in the comments below. And make sure you subscribe to my channel, please. I am independent. I want to remain independent, and I thank you for doing that. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.